fundamental pillar of positive psychology is that by rewiring and reprogramming your brain to think positively about situations and circumstances, you both have a happier lifestyle, but also your interactions and just your general demeanor as well as your health.
You mentioned about hierarchy of needs. Which one was it?
Yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't remember all of the exact levels, but at the very fundamental level of the pyramid are your very basic survival needs. So that includes food, water, shelter, and then as you move up, it's things like safety, belongingness, love, and then at the very, very top is self-actualization. That a lot of parents don't really teach their kids, budgeting especially. I think through self-exploration, you're able to understand who you are at the core, outside of your friends, outside of your family, outside of society. And I think through that process, you're able to identify, okay, what fundamentally makes me happy and fulfilled as a person. So I think trauma is a very misunderstood topic, because when you think trauma, the first thing I think about is post-traumatic stress disorder. One other thing, which is still not accepted, especially in North America right now, is CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the main difference between that is complex PTSD is a little bit more insidious.
You started a new venture as well. Would you like to talk about it?
Yes. So earlier this year, I started a new adventure. Right now, I'm working on building a company of my own. So the company I am working on, it's revolving around teaching people how to be in solitude in order to enhance their relationship and improve their relationship dynamics with others.
So it's covering basically the basic human needs, I would say.
Yes, yes.
Connecting with yourself and with others.
Correct. I think the important part is being able to enrich your relationship with self to enrich your relationship with others.
What is the best way to connect with yourself, you feel?
That's a great question. I think the best way, in my opinion, is to connect with nature, because in nature, you're able to see how interconnected we all are, because in reality, we're never alone. So even if you're by yourself camping, so one of the things I love to do is solo camp. So even when you're solo camping, for example, you realize how harmonious everything is. So how the water feeds into nourishing the trees, how the trees nurture all of the plant life and animals, and how those animals are then in a symbiotic relationship with one another, and how we are also like that as well.
It said nature heals you.
Yes, that is correct. I do believe in that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So self-exploration trips are very important, you feel?
Yes, I think so. I think through self-exploration, you're able to understand who you are at the core, outside of your friends, outside of your family, outside of society. And I think through that process, you're able to identify, okay, what fundamentally makes me happy and fulfilled as a person, and then what will help me find my purpose, and how can I give back to the world, and what is my best gift to give to the world.
There are many things that don't make us happy, but are important for society to run.
Fair.
Right?
Yes.
And many people do the things that makes them happy, and in return, something negative is the feedback from society.
It depends. I think the most important thing is balancing. Obviously, we live in a money-driven world, so the most important thing is figuring out a way to earn money and make sure that our bills are being paid. But I think outside of that is finding something that fundamentally grounds us and gives us happiness and meaning. Because it's very easy to work a job that pays six-figure salaries, but we're fundamentally unhappy. So it's finding something where we can balance and leverage both our interests and is able to make us money to help pay for the bills. I think it's important to find that balance.
Many people, when they are at peak of their profession, or they are earning enough to survive, not even survive, but have a great lifestyle, at that point of time, you suddenly hear they're no more. They have committed suicide. What is the primary reason, you think?
That's a great question. I think it's because they are so stressed out in their life and they haven't had the time to really connect with themselves, to ask themselves the deeper questions of what fundamentally makes me happy as a person. Because when you reach that level where you're able to provide for all of your basic needs, that is, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is when you start stepping up to self-actualization. And a lot of times, if you haven't had the time or all of those other needs met in terms of belongingness, being in community, feeling love, feeling like an interconnectedness and being part of something bigger, it's very easy to drive yourself insane because you need those levels to reach your self-actualization period. And when you're able to reach that self-actualization, that's when we fundamentally feel the most enjoyment, because as humans, we get the most pleasure and joy derived by giving to other people. So when you're able to find that purpose and you're able to find, okay, I can give in this way and this is my gift to share with others, you find joy. And I think a lot of people, when they're so caught up in money and they forget about the bigger aspect of life, it's very easy to be very tunnel visioned on just making money and being unhappy.
You mentioned about hierarchy of needs. Which one was it?
Yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Would you brief it for us a little bit?
I don't remember all of the exact levels, but at the very fundamental level of the pyramid are your very basic survival needs. So that includes food, water, shelter, and then as you move up, it's things like safety, belongingness, love, and then at the very, very top is self-actualization. So as you move up in the hierarchy, so the bottom levels have to be met first, and as you move further and further up the hierarchy, then comes that self-actualization, which is the very top part of that pyramid. And in the self-actualization is where you find the most happiness, the most joy, the most growth, and the most purpose. And when you are in that self-actualization part of the pyramid, that's when you really genuinely begin to live your best life.
Amazing. Nice explanation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about your way to psychology.
Okay.
How did it happen? You chose to learn psychology
Yes.
in your school days.
Yes.
How did it happen?
Oh, that's a great question.
What's the story?
That's a great question. So it started off in my first year of university, where I actually started off with visual arts and chemistry. And what happened in my first year was I ended up dating someone who had, I can't diagnose him, but he had issues connecting with people. And I think in that process, I got manipulated, I got gaslit, and I was just treated really, really terribly. And after things ended with him, which was a really, really bad breakup as well. I don't want to slander anyone's names here, but in the process of the breakup, I came to understand that I didn't want to be manipulated by anyone else ever again. So that was why I went into psychology, because I didn't want anyone to use control manipulation tactics against me. So I promised myself that I would learn psychology in order to ensure that I was protecting myself.
So a breakup led you.
A very ugly breakup led me into psychology.
A very off-topic question. Many people have said this on camera, off camera. After breakup, they have realized many things, and how people are, how people treat you. To sum it up all, are breakups that important in life?
I would like to say that diamonds are made in the rough, but I think in life will throw you a lot of curveballs. I think that's the best way to put it. And it depends on how you choose to use that situation, because situations will either make or break you. It fundamentally reveals who you are as a person. So either it's going to make you, if you already are a dark person, it's going to make you more dark. If you are a person of light, it's going to make you more in the element of light. So it ultimately depends on how you choose to use that circumstance or situation, because you can either grow and learn from it, or you become a victim to that situation. And I think it's important to realize how to go about doing that and navigating it.
Who is your favorite psychologist?
I would say Martin Seligman. He is the founder of positive psychology, and his book, Learned Optimism, is the one book that fundamentally changed my life.
What's so great in that book? Would you like to share?
Yeah, it's been over a decade since I read that book, but the fundamental pillar of positive psychology is that by rewiring and reprogramming your brain to think positively about situations and circumstances, you both have a happier lifestyle, but also your interactions and just your general demeanor as well as your health becomes a great benefit because of your thinking and way of being. And that also ties into my spiritual practices as well. Just being positive, being a being of light, and showing fundamentally kindness and compassion towards all living creatures.
What's the basics of spirituality according to you? How is it
That's a
connected to
fun.
psychology?
That's a great question. I like to believe in unity consciousness. So, what my fundamental belief is that just like birds, so this is the best way to describe it, is when you see a sky full of birds that are flying in a formation, the birds themselves don't realize that they're flying in the formation. They just know to fly in that formation and that way. Just like that, us as humans are like that as well on a global scale. So whether you live here or in India or in China, it doesn't matter. We are all interconnected human beings on a fundamental level. So on a core level, we all want love, we all want safety, we all want belongingness, and we all want to matter. And these are all key fundamental human characteristics. And because we are social creatures, we're all tied in together. And how you interact with me, like let's say you were to say something really horrible to me and I let that affect me. Now, all of a sudden, when I'm interacting with other people, I might influence people in that negative way as well. So that's the easiest way that it describes spirituality, is that we're all interconnected. So how you choose to interact with me is going to fundamentally affect how I interact with other people. So that's the best way to describe spirituality on a more grounded psychological kind of basis.
When was the last time you visited China?
Over a decade.
Over a decade.
Over a decade. Yeah.
What's the difference you feel in China and Canada?
That's a great question. The last time I went back to China, I would say it's a lot more materialistic. I think people back home are very, they like to compare statuses with one another, which is not as common here in Canada. Obviously, it depends on the group that you interact with. But the great thing about being Canadian is that it doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor. We fundamentally treat each other, for the most part, as human beings. So whether you're wearing Gucci, Louis Vuitton, or just, plain vanilla clothing, we still fundamentally treat each other with respect and with dignity. Whereas back home in China, there's a lot more comparison and there's a lot more needing to maintain a certain image. And I'm not saying that that is just exclusive to back home, but I'm saying it's a lot more prominent back home than here in Canada. Here in Canada, you still get those kinds of people, but I would say it's not as, it's lesser known compared to back home.
What else were your observations in China?
I would say that those are my main ones. I also think that with Chinese culture as well, because of the status, there's also, status is one element of it, of needing to meet certain requirements. But I think another key difference between North American culture and the culture back home is the identity in terms of how do I relate to my family versus how do I relate to myself. So people back home tend to be more family centric. So a lot of times I find that the parents like to control how the kids live their life. So whether that's, when you grow up, you have to be a doctor, teacher, engineer, lawyer, or you're a failure. Whereas here in Canada, I think the culture is a lot more laid back. You could choose to do what you like. You could choose to pursue the arts if you like to. Whereas if back home, if you brought up the conversation of, hey, mom and dad, I want to go do visual arts, it's like, well, I guess you're a failure then, and I'm going to disown you as a child.
What's the best part in parenting that you like in North America?
I think my favorite thing about parenting in North America is that everybody has a different way of raising their kids. There's no right or wrong way. And I think it's really interesting seeing the different parenting styles. One of my favorite things to see are parents that teach their kids skills from a very young age. Obviously, age-appropriate things, like I wouldn't teach a 3-year-old kid how to use a knife. But I think the fundamental life skills that some of the parents are teaching the kids, I think is very commendable here. Whereas back home, it's a completely different mentality. Depending on the social economic status that you grew up in, either you were forced to do these against your will because you were raised in poverty, or you have everything done for you by, servants, housemaids, and things like that.
Let's talk about parenting styles across the world.
Okay.
What's your ideal parenting style? What do you think is the ideal parenting style?
I think it's really hard to say ideal because it's very subjective from person to person. But what I think is very important, just based on my lived experience and what I've learned and what I would teach onto my kids, I think the most important thing is teaching kids the fundamental life skills from a young age. So that way, when they are well into adulthood, they already have all of the necessary life skills to be able to accelerate their growth and go into that self-actualization part of the process. So teaching kids from a young age how to cook, how to clean, how to do the house chores, how to budget. I think these are all very important skills that a lot of parents don't really teach their kids. Budgeting especially, because it's a very taboo topic, especially depending on your socioeconomic status. A lot of people in the lower to upper middle class don't really talk about it. Is when you talk from the upper middle class to the high class people, that's when you start talking about money. And I think it's something that is really important to talk about, because it's better you make those mistakes when you're young than when you try to make those mistakes later on when you have a family, when you have a mortgage, when you have car payments.
Are you an introvert or extrovert?
I'm a diehard introvert. I do very well in one-on-one conversations, but if you put me in a room full of people, I'm very, very quiet and I like to listen more.
So, of course, being introvert and being extrovert has their different pros and cons. What is the best part an introvert has, and what do you think is the best part an extrovert has? Their powers.
That's a great question. I think we all kind of fall on a spectrum. Like, again, I know we talked about earlier in our conversation with the narcissism and people pleasing. You aren't fully one or the other. You're usually somewhere in the middle. I think it's the same thing with introversion and extroversion. So depending on the situation that we're in or the environment that we're in, we usually fall somewhere in the middle of the scale. So I would say that the gift of being an introvert is you're very good at picking up on subtle cues and deep diving into conversation. So that's one of the beautiful things about an introvert, is you're able to take one topic and go super, super, super deep into it. And the wonderful thing about an extrovert is you're able to jump from topic to topic and feed off of other people's energies. So the extrovert is more like the life of the party, whereas the introvert is more like that deep diving, intimate kind of friend that you have.
You talked about the book Learn Optimism.
Yes.
Let's talk about that book a bit more.
Okay.
Every book holds a certain significance in your life. When you read a book, there are some lines that go along with you for all your life. And if that's your favorite book, of course. What's that for you? What are those lines for you?
I don't think I have a specific line from that book that I really like, but there is one quote that I really love. And that quote, I don't know, I don't remember the exact words, so please don't quote me on it, but the essence of it is with bison. So bison, when they see that a storm is going to come, rather than running away from the storm, they run towards it. And in that process of running towards the storm, they're able to escape the storm a lot faster. And I love that quote because it parallels humanity in general as well. So when you're faced with a hardship, instead of running away from the hardship, you face it head on. And in that process of facing the challenge head on, not only do you learn to overcome it, you have a lot more confidence in yourself in the process. And it actually ends up being resolved a lot sooner than if you were to try to run away from it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about your personal journey. A self-confidence that you hold, I think, would be a dream for many. And I think every person has some qualities that are dream for some. And on the same way, you dream of something higher than you. Right? So a person, we don't usually realize this thing, that the life we are living is a dream for many. Right? That realization stage has to be there when you are living of your dreams, I would say. What's your take on that?
I think keeping yourself humble in the process is really important because, as you mentioned, as you keep progressing, there's always more that you can reach. So there's two parts to it. There's one, being humble and showing humility in the process and realizing that we all come from, most of us come from humble roots, and not forgetting about the humble roots that you come from, and learning to give back as you begin to escalate in the hierarchy. I think learning to give back is a really important skill to have. And on that respect as well is just learning that everybody's journey is different, because it's so easy for me to compare myself to you or compare myself to someone else. And there's always going to be someone that is prettier than you, that is smarter than you, that is more fit than you, etc., etc. When you stay on your own path and you work on, okay, how do I better myself and beat myself yesterday and do better than the me yesterday? I think that's a really important skill to have. And it's funny that you mentioned confident, because if you talked to me 10 years ago, I'm a radically different person. Very self-conscious, very low self-esteem, and it's something that I've battled with and dealt with over the years. But I think through overcoming it, like for example, going to the gym, that's something I'm very adamant on. Going to the gym, working out and things like that, I've come to be more comfortable in my skin. But if you talked to me 10 years ago and you talked to me about confidence, I would laugh at
I think every individual has this stage in life where they are totally underconfident, with no self realization of things. And then a point comes in life when you realize things and you're confident in yourself. And also, I feel that the way you were parented matters. Because in some parenting ways, you make a child feel that the inferiority, right? When you compare with, in every stage of life, you compare the child, then I think it matters then how your adulthood is going to be.
Absolutely, yeah. But my whole thing is to not use your parents to become the victim of your own story, because in my personal journey, I grew up with very emotionally neglected parents because they were very busy working and taking care of us, especially as new immigrants growing up in poverty. They wanted to make sure that me and my brother had a better life here in Canada. So I can't blame them for being emotionally negligent in that regard. However, growing up, I loved to use that as an excuse for why I was the way that I was. Now, as an adult, obviously, I can't do that anymore. I could if I wanted to, no doubt about it, because it's so easy for us to blame people for being the problem as opposed to taking ownership and changing ourselves. And I think in the process of changing myself and understanding that my parents did the best that they could, now as an adult, it's my responsibility to improve myself and make sure that when I'm interacting with other people, that my parents aren't affecting me, which is then affecting my relationships with others.
Again, it comes down to the self-realization
Yes,
of things.
exactly.
That you need to realize that no other one is the problem. The problem is within you.
Correct. And I think it's really hard for people to realize that, because it's easy to say, oh, you're the problem, they're the problem, it's not me. But it's hard for you because it's a hit to our pride, it's a hit to our ego to say, oh, the common denominator of why all my relationships didn't work is me. But there's something liberating in that process, because when you admit that you're the problem, you also realize that you're the solution. And I think there's something powerful.
Okay, according to you, what is a religion? And is it really that important in society?
That's a really deep, profound question. I love learning about religion, first of all. So I did one course in religion, world religion, when I was doing my undergrad. And since then I've been reading the Quran. I've went to church a couple of times. I've also learned a lot of Buddhism growing up as well. So I would say that religion has its time and place. The fundamental heart of religion is to teach people the morals, ethics, and values, and the proper way of life, so that you're not harming other people as you are growing and developing and interacting in society. Where I think religion becomes the issue is when you pit one religion against the other, because at the heart of every religion is be a good person, do good deeds, be kind, be compassionate, try to show as much love and care. And I think that is the essence that a lot of people that are deeply rooted in religion forget about, is that love, kindness, and compassion. So I think that religion had its time and place back in the days, but I think now a lot of people are misconstruing it. There's still a lot of great people that are fundamentally religious, but it's about the understanding and receptivity to understanding that, hey, just because you believe in a different God doesn't mean that I need to treat you lesser than. I can still respect you as a person. And I think that's so beautiful about Canadian culture, because I have a friend who, actually, very funny story. One person is Muslim and my other friend was Christian, and they got married. And my Muslim friend, actually, funny enough, ended up converting into Christianity. So now they're both Christians. But a lot of my friends were shocked that these two very religious people, completely different religions, were able to come together in holy matrimony. And now that they're still very, very happy in their relationship and they're very, very fulfilled. So I'm very happy for them.
Beautiful. Okay. So, talking about religion, about different religions in the world, which religion did you grow up in?
I grew up with Buddhism, but we weren't super Buddhist. So I learned a lot of teachings, but I think the main one is letting go and living in the present moment.
Let's talk about a topic that has not been covered for years.
Okay.
There is a research done by Nancy Codoro about the male inexpressiveness. Males being very inexpressive about what they need from life. They don't express their emotions. As psychologist, what would you say about it?
It's both true and not true. So I think the main stigma with being just being a man, you're taught since birth to not show emotions because emotions are a sign of weakness. And it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I think it's quite true in that regard. But the beautiful thing about being in North America is that I think with mental health awareness, it's really being brought to the surface. And a lot of men are realizing that it's okay to feel emotions. But even though it's okay to feel emotions, now the main struggle with a lot of men are, how do I express it in a healthy way where I'm not taking anger out on the people I love and using it and channeling that anger productively. So I think that's the main challenge now.
But it really might take few decades to figure that out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think the beautiful thing is that because we are fundamentally in a society now that is a lot more aware of mental health, the issues that are coming about, I think there's a lot more open dialogue. And I think that's the first key pillar to healing what is happening. I think the second key thing is having women support men, and men also supporting men in that healing process of learning to nurture your relationships and being open and expressive and vulnerable in your emotional expression.
What males need in a relationship
Versus females.
versus what females need in a relationship, they are very different. So, according to you, what is the preferred thing that a male needs in a relationship to be a good relationship, and versus females, what they need?
That's a great question. If I had to sum it down, men fundamentally need respect and women fundamentally need love. I think that's the simplest way that I could put it. Obviously, there still needs to be the nurturing and care. And I think that's where the polarity comes in, because men fundamentally love that safe, nurturing environment. But at the very fundamental basis, as we talked about earlier, men fundamentally need that level of respect. Whereas for women, we fundamentally need that level of love, protection, and care.
Relationships nowadays going on, are they moving towards this thing? Are girls able to do that, and are guys able to do that?
I think that's the main challenge these days, is that with the divorce rates, a lot of people do not fundamentally cherish the sanctity of marriage and what that brings in, because a lot of people are very caught off with they love the sparkle behind the marriage and not so much about the work that is required to sustain a healthy, longevity, long-lasting relationship. So they love the idea of getting married without understanding the work that goes into a marriage. So I think that's the main challenge that people face these days, is that they look for a partner that has I don't deny that money is important. We live in a money society, but I think women are very fixated on, they have to be 6 feet, they have to have the six pack, they have to have the six figures and all of these things, that they forget about the fundamental values, the morals and the ethics behind that person, because these things are the actual evergreen qualities that a lot of people aren't looking for in a relationship. And I think these are the qualities that determine the actual longevity of a relationship. Because yes, you can marry a person that's very beautiful and very handsome, but they're not going to be beautiful or handsome forever. In about 10 to 20 years, they're going to start losing hair. They might, lose their job. If they are working a hands-on job, if they get into a workplace accident, now all of a sudden you're out of a job, and it's these evergreen qualities that will sustain the longevity of a relationship. But because people are looking for the superficial qualities, a lot of these relationships don't last, because as soon as the woman gets, older and their youth no longer is with them, if the man is fundamentally looking for a woman that only has those looks, now he's going to go for someone that's younger and is better looking. But if you are fundamentally looking for a partner that is grounded in the morals, ethics, and values, these are the actual determining factors for something that will last a lifetime, that will last through having kids, when a woman's body changes, through all of the mood swings with postpartum depression. Those are the things that you need to know your partner is able to handle, because life inevitably is going to throw you the struggles and hardships. You need to fundamentally be able to ride those waves together. And if you can't, that is going to break the marriage fundamentally.
I usually say one thing that, according to my belief, you cannot change your parents, can you?
No.
You can't.
No.
You cannot change your siblings. You can't. Then how is it possible that you can change your partner?
There's no way.
You decided one, and then you go on breakups, divorce, and all this. What if it was meant to be this way, that you cannot change your partner? It's decided by God once.
That's correct.
Would it be same?
Yeah, there's no way you can change a partner. But what I fundamentally believe in, so what I personally seek in my relationships, is someone that will grow with you. Because I think one of the scariest sayings is, well, you chose to marry me. I came as I am. And I think that's a very toxic saying, because I would never, ever want to marry someone that doesn't grow as a person. I think
change comes.
Yes, exactly.
Change has to come.
Exactly. And it's part of
But the
life.
change should not separate you, but to unite you.
Exactly. Every day, I think the most important thing is growing together and learning your partner every day. I think that's a very important skill that a lot of people are not taught or even consciously aware of. Because if you come in with the mentality, well, I've been with my partner for 10 years, they're obviously this way, and you don't give them the room for growth.
Again, we are a money-driven society.
Yes.
We need money to function. And it's needed every day, each second. Your rents have to go, your groceries have to come, your household stuff has to be there, your car, your home, everything is there. But again, does it matter more than a relationship?
The money.
Yeah.
No. I think, again, we have to look at these evergreen traits, because you can be a millionaire today, but if you don't know how to handle your money, you could be a broke person the next day. I think that evergreen traits are very important. So what I look for, again, is not so much how much money the person has, but do they have the ambition? Do they have the drive? Do they have the skills to be able to earn money? Because if you were to, this is a very good litmus test, is if I strip away everything that the person has, so all of their looks, all of their belongings, and all of their family background, the power, the fame, the money, the whatever, if I strip them down to their core essence, do I still want to be with this person? Can I still build with this person? Can I even build with that person? And when you answer those questions positively, then you can build something that is sustaining. Because again, you could have inherited that money.
If your answer is yes, that means that is a person for you.
I think so. Obviously, there's a lot of other caveats to it. But when we're talking about building life together, these are the things that you should look for.
In a relationship, a point can come where you are more focused on your growth than spending time with your partner. I would not say that's wrong, because that's also very important. Because if you don't grow, you don't have money, you don't have something, then how will you work? How will the family function? And at that point in relationships, the break happens because it's like you're not giving enough time. But the other person needs to understand that it's not just about relationship at point, but it's about living life as well.
Exactly.
Basic things are important.
Yeah. But I think it comes to mutual understanding.
Yeah.
I
At
think that's the
last,
important
it's all
part.
that.
Yeah.
And I think once these people marry, they have these traumas, their childhood traumas, which they bring in, and they pass it on to their children.
If they don't heal.
Yeah. How parents can heal? How do you think parents can heal so that they don't pass their childhood traumas to their offsprings?
I love that question. It's something I've been exploring actively. So, with healing relational traumas, there's two parts to it. So, the first part is healing on your own. So, there are certain aspects within yourself that you have to do the work with. Otherwise, you get into a codependent relationship, which becomes a whole other set of problems. But fundamentally, relationship traumas have to, and I mean have to, be healed within a relationship. So there's two aspects. One is the doing the inner work, realizing, oh, I didn't realize that my narcissistic parent is the reason why I'm a people pleaser now, and I have a hard time vocalizing my thoughts. So learning on healing that dynamic on your own, but then also practicing it when you get into a relationship and learning, okay, it's okay for me to say no to my partner. It doesn't mean that I hate them and I don't want to spend time with them. It just means I need to take care of myself first. And when you're able to balance those two of healing the relationship on your own and together, and creating space as well, I think is very important. Because if, for example, you say something and in your world, let's say you put each other down for fun and it's just something that you grew up in, but for me, it's a very triggering thing. When you realize that, then you learn in our relationship dynamic that, okay, I shouldn't say those triggering things because it's going to trigger Fionne's trauma. Then in that process, it becomes very healing as well. So I think that becomes important, because if you're not able to balance out those two things, then what will happen is that you end up triggering each other and it becomes a me versus you when it really should be a we and us kind of situation.
Our passion usually helps us to come out of a depressed and anxiety state, I'd say. Your art form, if you're an artist, you paint, you do the art, and you express emotions. Then, if you are a poet, you write something, some poetry. If you are a dancer, you dance, and you express your emotions, and that helps you to come out of that depression state. And for introverts, that's a blessing because inside they're a bomb. I think you can relate to it much more.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way for creative expression. I don't think it necessarily solves the underlying problem of the depression, but what it does is it's a great outlet to get those emotions out in a positive, productive manner. Because as we talked about off camera with the Body Keeps Score, whatever you fundamentally do not feel through gets stored within our body. So through creative expression, whether that's through dance, through art, through music, through other means, through some people do kickboxing, physical kind of activities, these are all channels to get that stored energy out. And when you're able to get that stored energy out, it no longer gets trapped within your body. So I don't think it fundamentally solves the depression, but it's a good way to channel out the feelings that you're going through productively. And also in that process, you're able to connect with other people that are like-minded. And then through that, you're able to alleviate that through a sense of community.
So, to say in an easy way, does following your passion or having at least some passion to do something at a point of time helps you in depression state or anxiety state to express emotions, to ease out? I'd say it helps.
It does. I would say it doesn't solve the depression, but it alleviates it. So it's almost like a pressure cooker. So when you are able to have these creative outlets, it's almost like releasing the heat in that pressure cooker so it doesn't explode. I think that's the best analogy I can give.
You talked about the book, Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
Would you like to share a bit more about that book?
Yeah, I'm still in the midst of reading it. So in all complete disclosure and honesty, I don't know too much about it. But what I do know about it, just from somatic healing and about the other types of psychology papers that I've read, fundamentally as humans, we are the best example I like to give is it's almost like a gazette. So if you see a gazette that is being hunted by the predators, what typically happens is after the predator leaves, the gazette will get up and it'll do a complete full body shake. And in that process, it's its way of releasing all of the trauma and the stress. Just like you see in dogs as well, they do the same thing. After a very stressful event, they'll shake their entire body. Humans, we're trained to not do that, which doesn't make any sense to me. But when you are able to create those safe spaces where you can shake off or move that energy out of your body, then it no longer causes any kind of damage to you. And unfortunately, science, I think, is still a little bit behind in doing the actual proper research to find how that trauma and how those emotional triggers fundamentally affect us as people.
How this body keeps the score thing in reality works, in our real life, how it works. What do you think?
I think that the body, the best way to explain it is with my personal experience is with I guess bloatedness. So for me, I get stressed pretty easily. I'm a very highly sensitive person. So I find that whenever I get stressed, I eat a very clean, healthy diet. I do all of the exercises. I don't get enough sleep. But I think through the lack of sleep and through the stress, what typically happens to my own body is I end up getting very, very bloated. And it also affects my hormonal cycle as well. So I'll start breaking out and things like that. I'll start losing hair from the stress. So I think every different person physiologically reacts
Has a
differently.
different way to react to it.
Exactly.
What is the essence of love and developing a beautiful, healthy, and everlasting relationship, according to you?
Beautiful, healthy relationship. I think it is mutual respect and understanding. So, what I've learned over the years in all of the relationships I've built, whether that's professionally, romantically, platonically, the most important thing is understanding that your perspective is not the only perspective that exists out there. And when you learn to step outside of your frame of mind and you understand that the other person you're talking to fundamentally has their own experiences, their own upbringing, their own thoughts, beliefs, behavioral patterns, even if on the fundamental level we have the same morals, ethics, and values, just our perspective and the way that we do life is different, and holding space for it and understanding that there's no right way. Just because you approach it one way doesn't mean it's the right way. Just because I approach it is not the right way. And just holding that space, I think, is very important to nourishing and nurturing any kind of relationship.
That's like a way of living,
Yes.
your lifestyle.
Exactly.
Talking about lifestyle reminds me of the book Ikigai,
Yes.
Japanese famous book. Would you like to sum it up for us?
I haven't read the book
And
myself.
and this concept of seeing the beauty in what is it called, the
Perfectly imperfect.
perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
What's it all about?
Yeah, so I think Ikigari is a very beautiful concept because it's emergence of purpose, of money making, and of happiness. So it ties in all three of these elements together. And I think what I love the most about Ikigari is I think it's also, I don't know if it's the same term that is used, but in Japanese culture, when a bowl or when a piece of pottery is broken, they'll use gold to put it all back together and it becomes a beautiful one of a kind piece of art. And I think it's very similar to us as people because we're all perfectly imperfect in our own way. So we all fundamentally have flaws, but by embracing those flaws and by understanding that it's just a part of humanness and what it is to be human, I think is very beautiful because in that you find grace, you find compassion, and you find humility. And by understanding that we're all fundamentally people, you are able to, it brings like a sense of togetherness where it's like we have this shared experience of being human, what it is to be human. And by understanding that, hey, We're all learning and growing at our own rate, even though you're making mistakes and I'm making mistakes. That's okay. We're all learning in the process, and that's what matters.
You told us about Dr. Gabor Mate. What you'd like to share? He's such an inspiration for you?
I absolutely love him because he talks a lot about trauma. So I think trauma is a very misunderstood topic, because when you think trauma, the first thing I think, at least the first thing I think about, is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is soldiers going out to fight a war, coming back, and then not being able to reassimilate themselves into everyday reality. And that is what is known as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. One other thing, which is still not accepted, especially in North America right now, is CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the main difference between that is complex PTSD is a little bit more insidious, because you don't have to go through a war in order to face these symptoms. They can come about in many ways, and a lot of it is either a situation or circumstance where it's not so much the actual situation that happened, but it's what happened after the situation and how was it dealt with. So something, I don't know if you like talking about the darker topics, but like, for example, rape or sexual trauma, it's not the actual accident or incident of the rape that affects the person, but it's what happened afterwards. Like, did you have the support system that you needed? And something as traumatic as rape can be okay and dealt with if you have the proper support system and network to help you work through that process. But if you don't have that support network, then it becomes a complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because you haven't had that support network to work through the issue, when any kind of trigger happens where, like, let's say, for example, now I can't have people touch me or anybody near me because that becomes a trigger, then it becomes a lot more insidious, because then this starts affecting your day-to-day life. And one example I love to bring up to help explain CPTSD better is it can also be a repetitive thing. So let's say, for example, when you were a kid, every single time you had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, let's say you hated it as a kid because you always got bullied. The bully would always steal that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, when you're in a romantic partner, and let's say they made you a peanut butter jelly sandwich, it can be very triggering. Even though your partner is just thinking, this is just a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but because in the past you had such a traumatic experience of it, now this peanut butter and jelly sandwich becomes a trigger because of what happened in the past with it bringing up being bullied. So that's the best way.
And how your partner can deal with that situation with you?
That's a great question. I think it depends, because everybody has a different response. So it can be broken down to four F's. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So fight can be, we're going to be either physically fighting with each other, or I'm going to be yelling at you. Flight can be running away from the situation, shutting down. Freeze is pretty much you just completely freeze up in the situation. So stonewalling is a really good example of that. And fawning, which is probably the worst one. So fawning is where the people pleasing kind of comes out. So let's say, for example, your partner is saying, hey, like, eat your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Then you're going to eat it even though you hate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and it makes you feel nauseous and want to puke. But because you're going into the fawn response, what you typically do in that fawn response is you typically cater to that person so that you are safe. And these four types of responses fundamentally come from childhood and how you dealt with those triggers or the feelings of unsafety growing up.
So can we say that our adulthood is mainly the result of how our childhood was there, or how traumas affected our childhood? Does all the traumas of childhood shape you, the you are today?
100%, which is really funny that you brought that up, because whatever you don't consciously know of, it comes out subconsciously. So for example, let's say the more you dig into your childhood and what happened in the past, the more easy it is going to be to rewire and reprogram your brain, because now you're consciously aware of how your childhood is affecting your present day. So the best example I like to give is just drawing from my own childhood. I grew up with a very narcissistic parent. And as a result of that narcissism, I grew up as a people pleaser. So whenever I'm put into situations, I'm still learning to recover from the people pleasing. But whenever you put me into situations with people and it triggers my responses, I tend to people please. So I'll say the right things, I'll do the right things and whatever. whatever. It's not a good time because I'm not standing up for myself. But because I recognize that that was a result of my upbringing of dealing with a narcissist, now I'm able to put myself into safer situations for one, but I'm also able to learn to speak up for myself by choosing the right people and only associating with people that are able to give me space to vocalize my own concerns. But that comes from recognizing what happened. And until you recognize what happened, you're going to fundamentally attract people into your life, whether that's romantic, platonic, or otherwise, that mimic those relational dynamics with your parents.
What is the best way, according to you, to deal with your childhood traumas? If we go stepwise, in 3 steps, how do we summarize it?
First, I will start off with going to see a therapist. I think it makes a huge difference because by being able to talk to someone outside of your friends that can see things objectively, one, they can equip you with the right tools to work through your emotions. Two, they see things from an objective lens and they're not saying, oh, Steve was an awful person anyways, you shouldn't date him. They're not feeding into that. And I think that's really important is you have someone that is looking at it objectively. And third of all, by working through a therapist, having the tools and looking at things objectively, they're also able to shift your perspective and give you a different perspective. So what really helped me when I have gone through that therapeutic process is having the therapist tell me, hey, look, even though your childhood doesn't seem like it was that great back then, maybe you should look at the positive things that happened. And by looking at those positive things over time, I'm able to realize, hey, look, my parents did the best that they could in their circumstances. And it took a really long time for me to realize that, hey, look, they were fundamentally hurt as kids as well, but they did the best that they possibly could. And now it's up to you to heal through that so that that doesn't get passed down. And that's all you really can do.
Let's talk about the book. It didn't start with you. How would you like to sum it up? What would you like to say about the book?
I think the most interesting thing is just drawing the parallels and understanding that the most important question to ask is, what is wrong with you? Don't ever ask that question of what is wrong with you. It's more the understanding and the compassion of question of what happened to you. And I think that's such an important switch to make because when you are fundamentally coming out with the question of what's wrong with you, it already feels like an attack, right? It doesn't feel good in your system. But when you ask the question of what happened to you, you're opening up a conversational dialogue to really dive into that person's world because a lot of the maladaptive behaviors that we have came from our childhood. We don't choose to hurt people, especially the ones we love, which is very funny because the triggers usually come up the most and end up hurting the people we love the most. And those are the people we never want to hurt because we fundamentally love them. But it is because in that intimate relationship that you feel safe, that is why those triggers come up the most, is because we feel safe. And that's where we end up lashing out at the people we love.
Exactly. For anyone facing these childhood traumas and not even realizing that what they're facing today is because of a childhood trauma, what's your one line suggestion?
I think I would probably sum it up with kindness and compassion again, because you never truly know what a person is really going through. And that's why I always preach kindness and compassion, because you only know the tip of that person's story. You don't know everything below the iceberg.
And maybe the person is not even comfortable sharing with you everything.
Exactly. And you never know, because by simply showing kindness and compassion. So one of the big things I love to do in the morning is I love to say good morning to people when I walk by. Sometimes people stare at me like I'm a crazy person, but I really believe that kindness starts in simple actions like that, because somebody could be having a really, really, really bad time, but just by waving, saying hi and saying good morning, it can raise that person's spirit up, even if just by a little bit, to give them a little bit of hope and humanity.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important.
You talked about a small quote from Chinese culture. First sweet, then bitter.
Yes.
Please tell us more about it.
Yeah. So there's a Chinese saying that my parents brought us up in and taught us. So in Chinese, I'll say the full quote and then I'll summarize it for you in English. So it's xin tim hao fu or xin fu hao tim. So xin tim hao fu is first sweet, then bitter. And xin fu hao tim is first bitter, then sweet. So what that's saying in essence means is in life, you can choose to go through the hardship first, which is the bitterness, in order to enjoy the sweetness in life. Or you can choose to enjoy the sweetness in life first to then enjoy the bitterness. And either way, you choose. And my parents have always taught me to do the bitter stuff first. It's do the hard things first. Go to school, go through the 4 years of study, work very hard, get a good job in order to then enjoy the fruits of your labor, which is the sweetness of life. Or you could choose to slack off and have fun now, which later on is going to be a lot more difficult because if you want to have a family and you want to pay off a mortgage and pay off a car, that's going to be a lot more difficult if you chose to have fun first and then suffer the consequences later. It's the same thing.
Great. It was lovely having you at the podcast, Fionne.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming to the Mug Talks. It was great talking to you. Have a nice day.